Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, Senator.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Senator. And members of the Ag Committee, I'm Dave Domina. I'm from Cedar County. I have farming interests there, have some banking interests in Wayne County. My brother raises hogs in Cedar County. Hogs have been a part of the Domina family clan since before I castrated my first one more than 50 years ago. I have also had a great deal of experience at production agriculture involving contracts and some experience that hasn't been commented on today about the poultry industry and the predecessor for what is going on in the swine industry that has already dominated chickens. I'd like to share some of that information with you. I've distributed here documents, 3 separate documents. They're extensive. The first is a 5-page summary of what I'd like to have you know generally about my testimony. The second is a paper I co-authored with an Auburn University ag economist named Robert Taylor that was done for some USDA, U.S. Department of Justice hearings on the livestock industry in 2010. And the third is the author's, Dr. Taylor's and my copy of a law review article published at 15 Drake Ag Law Journal, section 61 in late 2010, studying the effects of contract agriculture on markets and on family farms. I'd like to start by saying that almost everything that has been learned about the chicken industry will almost inevitably be learned by the swine industry if this statute is enacted. I listened with interest to the recitations from our neighbors from Iowa and our hopeful young farmers from Nebraska. I share their optimism about Nebraska and Nebraska as a place to farm, but I know that we cannot improve the state of Nebraska or its agriculture by allowing corporate ownership of our livestock and resigning our people to caring for that livestock on a contract basis. It just doesn't make sense that exporting our wealth will enhance our income or our revenue. Let me say this statute is pernicious. Its problems don't appear on its face. Here's one of them. Building the facilities you've heard about today at a capital cost of $1 million plus involves a 20 to 30-year loan. You heard it said today that some of these contracts are 12-year contracts. The Attorney General of Iowa has made a practice of posting contracts involving swine on a website that he maintains through his office. And you'll see that most of these contracts involving the swine industry are 5 years or shorter. Poultry contracts tend to be 2 or 3 years. So once one has a 20 to 30-year mortgage on a facility and is into a first or second 2, 3, or 5-year contract, the disparity between pressing debt and the inability to negotiate a new or renewed contract crushes the farmer. There is no ability to negotiate on parity. The contracts always include arbitration clauses. They always include secrecy and confidentiality clauses. They are often accompanied by oral promises that you do a really good job, we like your animals, you get a sweetheart deal. But in a confidential communication with the next producer down the road, the same promise is repeated and it doesn't prove to be true. There's another serious problem with these contracts and their mismatch. And that is that there is no market for these animals. Understand, please, that what is proposed here is that the packer will become the owner of the animal when it is farrowed and will own the animal until it is rendered. It will not be sold, not as a weaned pig, not as a pig to be fed, not as a fat animal to be butchered. There will be no market. And anyone knows that the way that wealth is generated is to be involved in transactions involving the sale of assets and the acquisition of assets and a vibrant market in which people both bid to sell or accept bids to sell and bid to buy. That's eliminated by this statute. In the poultry industry, the elimination of that process has led to a different kind of competition. It's called tournament payment. And it works this way. A plant with a series of contracts devotes a pool of bonus money available to producers to the bonus process, announces the tournament terms, and sets the producers against one another to compete for that modest bonus. So instead of neighbors helping neighbors, neighbors are incented to hurt neighbors. Let me just be brief about a couple of other points, and then I think what I've written for you covers this. We could find no evidence, and I want to stress that, after an econometric investigation by my co-author, who is an economist. I'm the lawyer and the color writer in this work. No evidence based on USDA data that anywhere in the poultry industry was there an improvement in the status of living of the people who entered into these contracts. You have heard about neophyte contracts in Iowa, and I want you to consider that they are neophytes. Yeah. Senator, I'm out of time.
Yes.
And I understand.
And any questions?
Can I just ask this, Mr. Domina? Apparently we did this with chickens, and this would be a step with the pork industry, and we're not going to do it with the cattle. What's the lesson from the chicken industry?
The lesson,
or do you expect the same outcome if we go down that road with the pork producers?
The lesson from the chicken industry is that the income of the chicken producers declines, that the termination of a plant to which production is contracted, if it closes, automatically bankrupts the producers contracted to it. And that's because the concentric circle from which the supply is drawn gets ever tighter as the number of contracts is developed, so that the transportation cost goes down. If the plant is closed to modernize or for any other reason, you don't need that circle. Those people disappear. The debt burden is crushing. The number of bankruptcies, divorces, suicides among producers all increase in every chicken producing state in the United States, without question.
Do you have an opinion about what this would do to the depopulation of rural Nebraska?
It will continue the depopulation of this state.
And how has that happened? Is this something you've studied?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And it's commented on in these materials. It happens in three basic ways. Number one, the number of producers required declines. Number two, the viability of the production process diminishes and the number of workers required to assist with the process declines. And number three, as those declines occur, secondary declines in towns follow.
Is the state, are the producers in Nebraska, if you know, and I'm not inviting speculation, but if this is something you've studied, we hear that this is happening in other states, that this is just a nod to the reality of raising hogs. What's going to happen in Nebraska if we don't do this? Are we going to be at such a disadvantage that Iowa, regardless of whether we like it or not, is going to be producing pigs in these big pig factories for less money, and the guys in Nebraska won't be able to compete with that, and we'll just be left behind?
Well, Senator, the best way to answer that is with data. The average daily slaughter of swine in the United States is about 440,000 head. Smithfield slaughters about 120,000 head. Smithfield was acquired by exclusive Chinese ownership in July of 2013. Smithfield owns nearly 1 million sows already. Smithfield is essentially out of this equation. If there is no economic advantage, desire, or interest for the packers to own more animals, why would they put more capital cost in the system that now produces and supplies their raw goods? They have to squeeze the production costs down even more, or they get no return on the capital investment in these animals. And that's what they intend to do. That will come at the expense of Nebraskans. Now, it may be true that in the transition time, pressure on Nebraska producers is greater. In the long run, the only way for Nebraska producers to survive is to own their operations and at least have these choices. I can stay in or I can get out. These contracts will eliminate one of those choices until the end of the contract term and leave the producer with a mortgage. Senator.
Mr. Domina, even before you began your presentation, a lot was said about this bill drawing young people into farming, and I did not understand it, how that would happen. Will that happen, and if so, how will this be a stimulus for that, and if not, why not?
Senator, this bill could permit a young person to have less capital cost to enter into the production of swine because the young person wouldn't buy the animals. So the investment in capital cost would be limited to the building, the land, and the startup cost that goes without the animal. So there is that advantage. The disadvantage is in the loss of all of the alternatives that young farmer has about what to do with what is produced, and the rigidity with which that young farmer must remain locked in a relationship with a packer in order to retire the initial debt on the land and building. There has been no comment on the disparity between the duration of the production contract and the fixed cost of the building loan. And I dare say that bankers, my own experience at that being limited to 30 years of service as a bank director in a small ag bank, I think bankers are intensively interested in having the duration of the capital loan and the consistency of some expectation of income, either from a free market or from a fixed contract, relatively coincide. There's nothing in this bill to assure that will occur.
Just one other question. I had applied the term adhesion to these types of contracts because it does seem to me that they can say take it or leave it, and that's exactly what you have to do, or you're not going to get the contract.
Senator, I think you're exactly right, and I might comment that my client mix over the years of persons in agriculture has unfortunately included some of the neighbors of our friends from Greene County, Iowa, who have found themselves in litigation over those adhesion contracts.
Thank you.
Senator Bloomfield?
Thank you, Senator Woolman. Welcome down here. It's good
Thank
to
you,
see
Senator.
somebody from our part of the state. But,
All good things start in northeast Nebraska.
pretty much. I questioned somebody earlier, one of the other testifiers, about the possibility of young people investing this much money and then having the contract bail out. And I was assured that that was all taken care of, that Packer would have some arrangement with them that they would pay them off if that were to happen. Is that not what you see in your studies?
Senator, I've never ever seen that happen in the poultry industry, and it certainly did not happen with the clients I've represented who've had difficulties with swine contracts. The swine contract litigation I've handled is over delivery contracts, not packer-owned animals. So there is that distinction. But the economics of that distinction is who has the capital cost in the animal.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you for allowing
Thank you, Mr. Domina.